From Genesis 1:1 to Revelation 5:13, this is The Bible Says What. I'm your host, Mike Wiseman. The BSW swag bag giveaway is still ongoing. The ultimate BSW swag bag comes with a t-shirt of your choice from the Firebrand shop at thebiblesayswhat.com, several BSW stickers, BSW cards, and a signed copy of the book. So how does it work? For every book review left on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, you will get one entry. Every new patron of the show will receive one entry. And every t-shirt purchase from thebiblesayswhat.com will get you 3 entries into the drawing. The official rules will be posted at thebiblesayswhat.com. The contest ends May 30th, and the winner will be announced on the 31st. Good luck, everyone. That being said, today's intro is brought to you by The Bible Says What, the book. I will be reading to you from chapter 7, For Yahweh So Loved Himself. Through his own breathed out words, the Christian deity expresses his disdain for those who are prideful or conceited. Romans 12:16. The Bible says that Yahweh detests all the proud of heart and that he will not allow those who think too highly of themselves to go unpunished. Proverbs 16:5. He opposes the proud. 1 Peter 5:5. He teaches that pride goes before destruction and that a prideful spirit comes before a fall. Proverbs 16:8. Yahweh holds so much hate towards pride and arrogance. Proverbs 8:13, that he once turned a conceited king into a strange bird creature that ate grass. Daniel 4:33. In the book of Daniel, we find the story of King Nebuchadnezzar, whose inflated ego did not go unnoticed. Instead of seeking to glorify Yahweh, he sought glory for himself and boasted about his mighty power. Daniel 4:30. The Christian deity decided to punish King Nebuchadnezzar for having an ego. Using magical dew from heaven, Yahweh transformed him into a grass-eating creature with feathers of an eagle and nails like the claws of a bird. Daniel 4:33. Yahweh forced this man to live as an animal until he raised his eyes toward heaven and praised him. Daniel 4:34. Yahweh needed to teach this man a lesson. He needed him to pay for thinking too highly of himself. The Christian deity frowns upon those who are proud and self-centered, yet we find throughout the Bible Yahweh demanding attention and bragging about how awesome he is. He believes that no one can even fathom his greatness, that he alone is great and worthy of praise. Psalm 145:3. Yahweh wants his name to be proclaimed in all the earth. Exodus 9:16. He wants incense and pure offerings brought to him. Malachi 1:11. He even wants us all to sing praises to his name. Psalm 61 verse 8. How is this not seen as prideful and arrogant? Why does Yahweh get a pass? Is it not sinful when the Creator sins? Let's start the show.
Is there anything in the Bible that you yourself have an issue with? Okay, so it took you reading the Bible to realize that those things were bad for you?
Yeah, it actually did. I
Couldn't
didn't
figure this out on your own?
No, Ted Bundy could be redeemed. God doesn't kill children.
What do you think the Passover was? Yahweh sets up a whole system in the Old Testament where you slaughter animals just so he's able to forgive you.
Today's special guest is the host of This Could Be Interesting. Welcome back to the show, Garrett Vandenberg.
Great to be here, man.
Thanks for taking the time twice. So last time we kind of left
start.
Yeah.
This is going to become a regular thing, I bet.
I'm totally down, man. You're enjoyable. I love it. Last time we kind of left off with the Bible and what you believed in it and why you believed on it. Today I kind of want to just go with the Bible itself. My show and my book randomly posted in the back here. It's kind of from in the beginning to the musical apocalypse. So I kind of wanted to go from Genesis 1:1 and just kind of review that, then kind of review over to Revelation a little bit and a little between and see where we go, where we end up.
Sounds perfect.
So the Bible to you, just so refresher course for those who missed the last episode, is it's a teaching tool from Yahweh, or go ahead and explain that to us.
The Bible to me is a very complicated thing. The Bible to Christians has been used for a lot of things as well. It's been used as a teaching tool It's used as a canon of stories that we tell before bed. It's used as something to help us try to grasp abstract ideas theologically. Oftentimes stories, I think, can help you do that. And to me, I try to enter into as many of those useful ways of interacting with the Bible as I can. But it's not something that has a specific use to me. It's something that I learn, almost something that uses me.
Interesting. So how do you take the beginning of it, the beginning of the Bible itself, the origins of it all? Is that a true story? Is it more poetic? How do you take it?
Well, I resent you contrasting true with poetic. Because, I mean, I think it's definitely something I understand you saying it that way, because that's something that's become a very identifiable trait of our culture. That's the way we think about truth. We think about truth as being something that's like not even necessarily something that's like, it depends on if you're an empiricist or you're a rationalist, but like truth is something, I mean, from a rational perspective, it's something that can be like inferred based on, or deduced based on, not inferred, deduced based on certain core principles, and you kind of logically work it from them. It's like, okay, that's true because these baseline statements about reality are true, right? That would be like a rationalist approach. But like an empiricist approach would be like, it's testably provable. But then something more like poetic truth almost in some ways even lines up with that sort of empiricist perspective of truth, because poetry is something that when you read like a really true poem, or you listen to a song, I mean, the kind of poetry that most modern people like you and me interact with is music, right? When you listen to a music that really seems true, what is that? Why is it true, right? It's not true because it's necessarily telling like testifying to the events of a crime scene very accurately. It's like, it's considered, I mean, maybe you want to even abandon the word truth because it's so loaded from our sort of our perspective. But if we just like say it's meaningful, like what makes it meaningful? It's like, it's applicable. It makes you see things in a way, in a perspective that allows you to kind of get past certain problems you are struggling with. So I mean, when I think about the truth of the story of creation, I think there's a perspective even about the world that doesn't even, from a, well, let's set this to the side for a second. Even just from my perspective, where I have this sort of relationship of like rationality and empiricism and poetic truth, it's at least extremely poetically true.
Okay. All right. So extremely poetically true. In other words, do you think it's an actual event? An event that took place? I mean, do you think it accurately describes the event that took place? Do you believe that Yahweh breathed out these words and then the world came into existence?
It's such a difficult question to answer, because like there's still this loaded question about thinking about things from a very rationalist perspective, or a very not even literalist perspective, but like physicalist perspective. It's like, I think that the story in Genesis about creation actually happened, but not in the way that you probably think I mean when I say actually happened. Like, and this is me somewhat tapping into just the general Christian belief about it. And it's like, there is sort of almost a sort of superstitious belief in it, where it's like, you can't explain why you think it's true, or it's like you're totally disconnected from a scientific perspective sometimes when you're saying you believe in the seventh day creation. And it's like, I think partially that distinction is important, because, well, I mean, most of us aren't really scientists. When we need to, yeah, like I'm not a scientist. I don't practice science. And so even when I'm engaging with science, the only way that I engage with it is from a narrative perspective. I'm kind of told a story about reality based on the data that the scientists have gathered. And that's the thing that's applicable to me. And I think the story in Genesis about creation, about, meaning coming from above, and about, that breath of meaning filling this meaningless matter and giving it meaning, and then the separation of things and learning how to name things. There's a lot of really important and beautiful truth in that. It's just
poetically,
like, right, exactly. But it's like to we have a weird way of approaching the utility of utility of poetry, right? It's like, what is it useful for given what we want to accomplish? But like, especially with these stories, it's supposed to challenge our even conception of what we want to accomplish. It's like, what should be accomplished beyond what we think should be accomplished.
What this story specifically, that's reading a lot into it there. I mean, okay, let's skip the breathing out. We've it's poetically true somehow, right? I mean, it works. The trees, the whole fall of man, how does that work for you? Do you think that's why we have evil? Do you think that it's accurately described in the Bible? That's how it happened? How do you think it works?
So I want to say yes again, as a Christian. I want to say yes. I believe that's the way it happened, but I don't. Again, I don't mean that they were trying to write a historical account in the way that we would write one now.
Okay.
And this is fundamentally just true of mythology: is that myth is something that isn't at least one way of describing it or understanding it might be that it's like sort of a compression of history into a narrative structure that you could understand. It's like, you know, if you want to understand the whole history of the world, you know, there's a lot of stories. There's actually an infinite number of stories because there's an infinite number of perspectives you could look at that story through, right? And there's potentially an infinite amount of time as well, or at least depending on don't need to get into time philosophy.
Too deep, man. Too deep. I haven't even finished my coffee yet.
But there's so many perspectives you could understand existence from, and you know, you can try to do your best to just learn it from as many narrative perspectives as possible. Or if you want to like at least have a starting place, or like, I mean, I'm getting a little bit sidetracked here, but like a myth is an attempt, I think, to compress, I mean, maybe a national history, maybe the history of everyone into a story that you could understand, that you could tell to your kids at night, and that you could tell around the fire to your community, and that could help you kind of generally have an understanding of what's going on in the universe and what has gone on and where we're going, and stories, kind of an orienting story. So I think that there's a difference between an orienting story that doesn't ring true and one that does. And I think that the orienting story of the story about the fall and creation in Genesis is more true than other myths. And I don't mean that other myths aren't true as well. I just mean, I think this is the most true one.
So you do believe it's because the fall of man happened because man disobeyed God? Is that?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So man disobeyed God. Do you believe it was because they ate that fruit, whatever, of the tree of good and evil?
Yeah. So, I mean, if we want to read it as a literal story of eating fruit that we shouldn't have eaten.
If they disobeyed God, did he put that? See, my main thing here is, did God put that temptation in front of them in the first place? That's one of my main issues with the fall of man story is, you know, who put it there? Well, God put it there. Why? Well, he knew it was going to happen. So he knew that the fall of man was going to happen if he placed those trees there, if he put that, whatever it was, in front of them, that temptation. He knew they were going to partake, but he did it anyways. And he knew it was going to cause all this pain, suffering, and he was going to have to curse the man. He was going to have to curse the woman with painful childbirth, even if we, you know, if you don't believe that or whatnot, but that's what it says he did. And these are horrible things to do to somebody simply because you didn't listen to them. And then if we are to take it literally, it gave them the knowledge of good and evil. Well, that means before that, they did not have the knowledge of good and evil. How can you hold someone responsible for doing something if they don't even have the knowledge of good and evil in the first place? So they're kind of like toddlers, you know. I got kids, and my go-to is always, you know, if I go to a nursery and I put a poison gummy bear in the middle of the nursery, you know, how long? And I say, don't eat it. Even if I tell them, you will die the second you touch this gummy. 10 seconds for be done, you know. To make it worse, I you know, someone referred this to me, was like, what if I let somebody in to try and convince the toddlers to eat it? Like that's horrible idea. None of it makes any sense to me as a competent being. I mean, if he knows already, he shouldn't have placed it there to begin with. And if he loves them, he wouldn't be cursing them for such a ridiculous thing if they didn't know good or evil, or right
I
from
would say
wrong.
though that there is a poison gummy bear in every nursery. From
Hold on, I gotta call
poetic
my kid's
perspective.
school. Hold on.
Because despite the fact that you want to do your best to sort of protect your children and raise them in a way that you can allow them to kind of gradually grow up and introduce them to new responsibilities as they're sort of ready for them, there's always a zone a little bit past what they should be interacting with that, like, you can find this no matter where you look. It's like, okay, even if you want to remove all the knives from the house, if you want to get rid of every bit of bacteria that's in the house, if you want to get rid of you have cleaners in your house, if you want to make sure there's no cleaners in the house, like, you're going to do your best to build a fence that maybe hopefully they aren't going to get out of their play area and get into where the more dangerous stuff is, right? We always make an attempt to kind of this is what, like, symbolically, this is what Eden is. I think that Hebrew word just means a walled paradise. So there actually was a sort of a chaotic world beyond Eden that, like, Adam and Eve couldn't interact with yet. It was all dangerous out there.
It was waiting for him.
Right. But the progression of the story isn't supposed to be that God builds this garden and he ultimately just wants to throw them into the abyss anyways. And so he's just waiting for an opportunity, waiting for an excuse to judge them.
Well, I mean, he knows everything, right? We can agree that.
Right.
So
but the trajectory of the story is that ultimately his plan for Adam and Eve is to gradually grow up and to take dominion of the earth and to, eventually to rule the whole thing. But he gives them a little piece at a time. But the part of what the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is supposed to represent symbolically or poetically is Adam and Eve stepping out a little bit beyond their level, like the appropriate level of responsibility for them just yet. Rather than, trusting that there's a limit to their understanding, they transcend that limit and they say, no, actually, I have the knowledge of what's good and what's bad, right? That's what eating the tree of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil is. It's saying, I actually know the best way to live.
Or I would like to have that knowledge of good and evil so I can understand things better, instead of just being a toddler for the rest of your life. Let's grow up and understand.
I don't know. So it's not fundamentally. I see actually that's a useful tool to tell another story about maturing and to say that you can kind of use that. Again, it's with poetry, you can take concepts and you can recontextualize them and use them for a lot of meaningful ways. But within this story, it's like when it's almost like they ate from the fruit of ideology. They wanted to skip the step of always. From the perspective of a humble human being who recognizes that there's always, this is how you kind of try to transcend ideologies. You always live life with a little bit of humility and say, no matter how much I think I have it figured out, I don't have it figured out. Right. And that's a really important nugget of truth that needs to be always present in your worldview. And if you make the statement that I figured it out, I have it, I'm done. And a lot of Christians have done this. And this is Christians eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They're saying, I have it. Right.
Right.
So it's a symbolic representation of them taking the authority of saying what is best and putting it in their own court, rather than trusting that there's something that transcends them, that there's a higher morality that they can't grasp.
Well, it's definitely one way to take it, 100%. It can be taken a lot of different ways, and that's one. But in the end, because of this one thing, because of this one, mishap or misstep or whatever you want to call it, it's minor little thing, and we have to have bloodshed,
right?
And so that's ridiculous to me. I don't understand how we get from you ate from a tree, now everything has to die in order for me to be appeased. Is this a concept that you agree with that happens in the Bible, that Yahweh is, needing bloodshed?
I think I agree with that it happens. Again, it happens every day. And this is the thing about mythology, is that it's not about something that happened. It is sort of about something that happened, but it's about an abstraction of everything that's happened so far and what's happening. Right. So every time that we eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, every time that we enter into ideology and say that we understand what's best, until we're willing to give up that position, life gets progressively worse for us. Until ultimately, basically, we create our own hell.
We create our own hell.
Yeah. I mean, you could say we create it. It's sort of, it's something that, like, because it's something that everyone can experience, is something, it's almost something that's apart from us, but it's like everybody can experience that sense of being in hell, because as soon as you are unwilling to, I mean, you look at the worst atrocities that have been committed by mankind so far. Any one of those you can link back to ideology. Any one of those you can link back to this fundamental, basically, pride of saying we know what needs to be gotten rid of and what needs to stay. They feel like they've cracked the code. And every time we get into this loop and we think we've cracked the code, that's when we do the worst shit.
Sometimes, yeah, for sure. Yeah. But who makes life worse? Why is there not somebody that helps you make it better? I mean, if you're just doing simple things that are, I don't know where I was going with that one. I forgot where I was going with that. Regardless, let's go back to Jesus. So the bloodshed. If I see again, I lost my train of thought. I don't know where I was going with that.
Do you want to talk about raising kids again for a sec? Because I think that's a really great analogy, and I think it's a really great way to bring this story home, because it's like that myth is so true in the process of it, and so easy to watch children go through this experience of encountering this myth of thinking they know best, and then it's like maybe it has to do with eating their food, maybe it has to do with making new friends, but it's like, let's go to the making new friends narrative. It's like, okay, you're trying to learn how to actually have a friend, and that involves playing, and playing involves sacrificing ownership of the toys that are in the room, and being willing to share them with other people. If you've decided that the best way to have fun is for you to have rule over all of the toys all the time, that's an ideology that's going to make life for you, and especially social play in the nursery, suck, because no one's going to want to play with you. And the longer you hold on to that, the worse things are going to become, until you get cast out from the community and nobody wants to play with you. And eventually, hopefully you have somebody who teaches you, hey, actually, if you lay this down, if you can set aside this, you can actually have more fun if you are willing to be a little bit humble here, if you're willing to let go of your control a little bit, and then people are going to want to play with you. Then you're going to be able to integrate into this community. So if I have somebody that teaches me how to do that, then suddenly I have all this access to life and to beauty and to relationship again.
And thank you. I remember where I was going now, but there's a huge difference between a ball and, let's say, a goat. A goat has life. It has thoughts. It does things. It poops and farts and ass all day.
Sure.
They really don't do much, but they're still goats and they're sentient beings. They have feelings. When you sacrifice a ball, you're just sacrificing a little playtime. But when you're sacrificing a goat, that's a whole life. And Yahweh requires the life form. He wants the life to be extinguished. He wants that blood, in several cases, to be splashed on different sides of the altar, to be spilled, and like put on your earlobe, and don't let it touch your toe. Or it's like the weirdest things. And this is what he wants done. And I see a big difference between a play ball and a life form. And another thing it was Malachi. In Malachi, I believe it is. There's a lot of Yahweh being upset because the sacrifices aren't perfect enough for him. And he gets so mad at these people because there's a blind goat, or it's deformed, and if you have crushed testicles, you can't enter my thing. He's just so particular about everything.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, calm down, man. Just accept an apology. I mean, they're trying, at least they're giving you something.
Yeah.
It seems very egotistical. It seems very petty. It seems very gross and disgusting. I mean, I don't see a point to it, and I can't see a correlation between just simply giving up, like you said, a ball or something simple, to a whole life form, and blood splattered everywhere. It's so barbaric. Why would he require something so barbaric? It just doesn't add up to the whole loving and father figure. My kids, don't slaughter the dog.
Yeah.
Just say you're sorry. You know, I mean, let's let the dog be. She's a great dog. You'll probably hear her barking later, but you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I definitely, I mean, and that's a great point. It's from where we're at, though. Okay, there's two different ways I want to think about this, because I mean, yeah, from one perspective, it's just like, yeah, you look at ancient history, you see the way people acted back then, and it's literally barbaric.
We're still doing it now, though. I mean, we're still being barbaric. There's definitely, even in the U.S., man. I mean, people sometimes, but I mean, it's still there. But this is coming from the God. This is coming from a loving God, a loving being who's supposed to be. We're supposed to look up to him. We're supposed to, you know, he's supposed to be our representation of a good father figure and whatnot.
I think one way, and I mean, it's a super deep question, and it's like I don't think we're going to get to the bottom of it in 5 minutes. No. But one way of thinking about it that's kind of helped me to try to reconcile with some of that, because I mean, but a lot of it still is just like, why? That's so weird.
Yeah. But a lot of it, like most of it, the majority of it.
Yeah, I mean, actually, like I would agree. Literally most of it, and I think part of that is a sort of cultural suicide that we've just like we've become totally out of touch with how to engage with myth, and that's a really heartbreaking thing to me. And like the more that I listen to people who are like who are really into mythology and or even just really religious, like I listen to.
What's the difference?
Well, being really into, because there's two perspectives of how to read history. One is like a historiocritical perspective, which would be like reading history to kind of get an idea about how people believed back then and sort of criticize them, and or just to kind of get a better to kind of inform our other sciences and like see, okay, well that maybe helps us figure out where this temple is going to be buried. Or, you know, that maybe helps us figure out a little bit more about why this guy's wearing this piece of jewelry, right? You can read it from a sort of
burning news people. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But the people who are really deeply religious, as opposed to people who are just sort of into it from a sort of scientific perspective, the difference between being religious and scientific is that that religion is about engaging with these stories, is about seeing, it's about tapping on them and sort of doing a psychological expedition to see what is it that these stories are getting at. And you know, you look in the Buddhist tradition, the Hindu tradition, the Christian tradition, or any of the other mythological traditions like Norse or Greek mythology, all of these, for some reason, we still tell stories with all of these types of characters, and almost all of the best stories that we still have tend to allude to or borrow from these stories. And it's like, why do we do that? Because something about them just it rings true to us, right? It's like, again, from a mythological perspective of truth, it's like there's something about them that's like they've compressed a whole bunch of patterns about reality into something that's like, hey, that's actually, I see that here, and I see that here, and I see that here. It's like that's a story that's really, really true. It's a story that's really, really true. It's not, again, it's not okay, but this is kind of a side trail. Talking about,
I mean, how do you know these stories are true? And there's a lot of fanciful stuff, especially if we're talking about the Bible. You got resurrection, you got talking animals, singing animals. Yeah. We'll get there. But like the sacrifice part to me is
yes, okay. Well,
beyond disgusting and pointless. I mean, there's so many other ways to do it. Why kill?
What I was going to say though, as far as how I think about that now, anyways, is, I mean, in the same way that when you're trying to teach your children something, you have to kind of reach into because kids are stupid. You have to
have their moments. That's for sure.
You have to like dumb down your speech. You have to like sit there and, okay, what is my kid?
Sometimes
like?
you
Bob
do.
The Builder.
I mean, yeah, sometimes
you could, but you want to try to like bring them up a little bit beyond their usual way of talking. You want to talk to them about like there's a psychological theory of like the way that we teach children how to talk is that we always just approach them a little bit. We use a little bit more complex words than we know already exist in their vocabulary, but we still kind of dump it down a little bit, because that's the process. That's that's how you sort of engage a flow state where somebody's able to learn something.
I'll use those, and then I'll ask them, do you know what that means? And they'll be like, I have no idea what you're talking about, Dad. Well, let me explain it to you.
Yeah, so you can explain it on that level, but most of even how we learn words, because I mean, when you first learn any words, you can't just say, well, let me explain it to you, right? Most of the way that we learn words, literally most of it, is through context. And so, yeah, you can do a little bit of explaining, and the best way you can explain is by giving a new context for the word that you've just said, right? Right? You tell a new story about the word, and then now they have that sort of, this word is useful in this sort of situation. I see, right? It's always about context, and you can definition can be a sort of context, but the way we learn words is that, right? So in order for you to be a good teacher, and I mean, again, I'm not a dad, but I do actually teach kids a lot. That's kind of my main job. I teach private music lessons. Nice. So I communicate with kids a lot, and I have to think about how can I make this make sense to this brain? Yeah. And it's like every kid's different too. They understand different things.
So true.
And I have to kind of reach into what stories about reality make sense to them, and kind of reshape them a little bit to kind of give them just something slightly above their understanding. So
right.
And it's like, if they don't like scales on their instrument, I've got to figure out how can they really like playing by ear. I'm going to play something for them, and it's going to include a scale, and they're going to learn it by ear. And then I'm going to, gotcha. Now you've learned how to play a scale, right? I have to kind of reach into their language and speak it to them on terms they understand. So when I look at the Old Testament, especially, and this could be sort of I don't want this to just be a total get out of jail free card here, but to the extent that ancient people are just dumb and barbaric and idiotic, I think, again, if you talk too much beyond somebody's comprehensive abilities, they just don't get it. And so you could say that, like, and I'm trying to apologize for God here a little bit. You could say that God is like I can't think of a better way of teaching people who are that dumb or that barbaric, that's old, that actually teaches them something. It's like you have to engage with their understanding of reality and just a little bit transcend it. And it's like, obviously, animal sacrifice was not uncommon. It's not like it just originated in the Christian tradition. Everybody was doing it. Somehow, for some reason, this ritual ended up everywhere. And it's like, how do you get past that? Well, you take a little, I think the Christian version of it is a little bit higher. It's going towards something. And obviously, by the time we get to the New Testament, we're beyond that. We don't do that anymore. So there is clearly a trajectory here within the Christian tradition to get beyond animal sacrifice.
Well, he did the whole one God thing, right? I mean, he went from them worshiping multiple gods to, look, I'm going to kill you if you worship any other gods. I mean, he made that pretty drastic change.
Well, actually, he didn't say not to worship other gods. And I don't think it's bad to worship other gods. In the 10 Commandments, it says, don't worship any other gods before Yahweh.
Well, he also slaughters his people for worshiping other gods. Let's go Jeremiah 19. Not only does he slaughter his people, but he makes them eat their own children for worshiping another god. He makes this a very serious offense. I mean, he's pretty adamant about it. That's just one little spot. The people in Hosea, the name escapes me, but he slaughtered their cherished offspring. Hosea 9:16. He made their milk run dry so that the babies would starve to death. It's a pretty serious thing. Pretty egotistical, if you ask me. I mean, he tells us that that's why he created people, was for his own worship. I think it's in Isaiah. And if you don't do what you're made for, well, you're going to eat your kids, and he's going to make you eat your kids. Oh, yeah, and then if you don't sacrifice the right thing, he's going to be mad at you. I'm not seeing any of the good parts here. I'm not seeing anything beneficial from this guy.
I mean, I think that's a great point. Again, these stories, from our perspective, from the way that we tell stories now, it's not easy to engage these stories. It's not easy to find the meaning or any meaning. It takes, for one thing, some science. It takes trying to understand, how did these ancient people think? Why are they telling this story this way? This sounds absolutely fucking nuts. But in order to get there, it's like, well, why does Kronos eat his children? That's
right.
Horrible and barbaric, right? Why?
And how do they survive inside? What's
And
going
like
on?
the way Loki treats his wife when he's being like tortured, he like spits on her all the time. It's like, there's like all these gods that are interesting and we're supposed to learn from. The way some of the things they do are so
bizarre,
so out. It's so bizarre. But I think fundamentally, the bizarrety. Is there a word?
New word. I love making new words. It happens all the time on this show.
To me, I think that's supposed to be a little bit of a clue, or it's supposed to be a little invitation to say, okay, if that seems bizarre to you, then maybe spend a little bit longer thinking about this. Like maybe there's something there. Maybe like why does that seem strange to you? Let's think here a little bit. And maybe that's part of why these stories are interesting to us, just their bizarrety.
Maybe there's nothing
if we
there.
could use that word.
It's
Maybe
just some guy wrote
there.
it down. He forgot the real story, so he just jotted in his own stuff. And now we've got this story, and everybody's trying to find meaning out of it when it was just some drunk dude couldn't remember the story.
But even if somebody just wrote a really dumb story and people kept on telling that story and finding meaning, the canon of people trying to find meaning in that story would still be meaningful, because people are you can interpret a really dumb story, and if you can interpret it and you can make something meaningful out of it, then what you've just done, your interpretation and your recreation of that story suddenly becomes something that like is culturally meaningful and that is poetically gives you like a clue about truth about reality or something like that.
It'll give you a clue about, okay, let's go to another one here. I like that, a clue about the truth of reality. Where it says that happy is the one who dashes children against the ground, and it was the Babylonian children. There it is, Psalms 137. O daughter of Babylon, doomed to destruction, happy is he who repays you for what you have done to us, he who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks. And it's supposed to be a good thing, well, because it's their enemies. So I mean, Yahweh's not really doing it in that instance, but how do we find something good out of that? I mean, there's a lot of stories in here that are just horrible, like the one where the bald guy is going up the thing, Elijah, I think it is, and they're bald head, the kids call him bald head. He turns around and calls a curse upon them in the name of Yahweh,
by
no
bears.
Right? And then Yahweh's like, yeah, go ahead, maul those kids. It's like, I what's the moral of that story? Don't call people bald who are bald.
Well, hey, I'm not gonna do it. I'm
It's okay. It's true. I mean, it's. I have no hair. It doesn't work. My head's not working. Yahweh
bears might show up, man.
Yeah.
Bears might show up.
I mean, how do you make those good? I mean, there's so much of that. You've got the laws that are in the Old Testament.
That first story about the knowledge of good and evil is, I think obviously it's like from a narrative perspective, it's the first thing that happens. But I think it's also at the beginning of the Bible and supposed to be sort of the introduction to because the Bible isn't sort of in chronological order. It's not in the order of like how old the books are. Like the oldest book I think is Job or something like that.
What was it? I think you might be right with that one, Job.
Yeah. And Genesis is obviously Genesis isn't just one book either, right? It's a combination of like
a collection,
4 or 5 different authors, and it's like it's a culmination of like something. Okay, these are the best bits of all these stories. We're gonna piece them together.
Yeah.
But I think the reason that the Genesis is at the beginning of the Bible is supposed to be a frame of reference to help orient you in these other stories. And so especially, when we get to a story where there's crazy shit like dashing babies on the rocks, where it's really difficult to just find anything redemptive in that. One approach is just to say, hey, that's a little bit beyond my understanding. I just don't get it.
Wow.
And it's just, that's fundamentally, I think that's what the Garden of Eden story is trying to teach us, is to say there's going to be moments in life and even in this book where this is not going to make any sense. This is and the hope is that someday you might, like I said, someday Adam and Eve do take dominion, and actually ultimately they do. Eventually humans do end up, taking dominion of the world, and eventually their relationship with creation is even redeemed through Christ.
We screwed it up, but
yeah. But
we got dominion of this place, but man,
we certainly
what did we do with it? Trashed it.
But so yeah, ultimately there could be something redemptive there, but I think what we're supposed to, like, the orienting feature of the story of this Garden of Eden story is supposed to teach us that, hey, there's going to be, you don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Don't say that you have this story figured out. And that's why partially even why I'm trying to live that out a little bit in my answers to these questions, because I don't want you to think that anything I'm saying here is an absolute or a final interpretation of the meaning of these stories. To me, these are stories that we're never going to figure out. And that's the point.
Well, I'm going to go right back to 1 Corinthians 14:33, where it says that Yahweh is not the author of confusion. You know, I mean, if he's not supposed to be the author of confusion, why the hell am I so confused? I mean, there's so much. You're confused. I'm confused. We established this last time. And we're both very confused on all the stuff that's in here.
I wonder. Let's see if we can look up. I'm going to go on Blue Letter Bible for a second.
Do it. I'll go on.
Author of confusion. Yeah, your parental advisory. Okay, 1433. Let me see here for a second. So I'm going to imagine that this word confusion specifically, can I get interlinear? It's not of confusion. This is akastasia. What does it mean? Instability, a state of disorder, disturbance, confusion. Okay, and there's some other context for what it's used. So this is like God is contrasted with the devil, the diabolo, right? Which the feature of that character is he's someone who casts things apart and takes them out of relationship from each other. And ultimately, that is not what God wants to lead us towards. God wants us to gradually learn how to piece together this great mystery of reality. And, you know, confusion is a state of feeling like nothing makes any sense and casting everything apart. It says right here, it's a state of disorder, of instability, of disturbance. I think it might even be useful to read a little bit more of what's going on in this chapter, but
you don't really want to read
longer,
further.
sure.
You don't want to read further. Trust me, that's a whole nother can of worms right there. That goes into the women speaking in church.
Ooh. Oh, that's a great. I mean, because again, this is where the sort of the science of or like even a level of archaeology or a level of history becomes important, because you know when it comes to that statement about women not speaking in church, this. Like if you read this book again, like we were brought up to read it, this is an instruction manual for life. You get a way too simplistic understanding of how to engage with these texts, and if we have a sort of respect for this, like this is, for one thing, this is just old stuff. Like I can't even read Beowulf. I'm trying actually to read Beowulf right now with some of my friends. It's like it's so old, it's so disconnected, and obviously I can't read it in the original Old English. It's like it's a bunch of other like Icelandic or something, Swedish, whatever. But like trying to engage with an old story is just hard. And if you act like it's not, you're going to miss so much. If you act like it's not, you're doing that thing again where you're saying, oh, this is easy, I actually get it. Right. But if you can approach it and say, hey, with this sort of humility and say, there's always something beyond me in this story, and I can and approach it that way. But there is even a level of that you can understand this passage in 1 Corinthians 14 a little bit more about women being silent in churches, because this is not an instruction book to humanity. This is a letter from one guy to a specific people at a specific time. And as far as I know, there was a lot of specifically some of the women at this community were just they were trying to have a group discussion, and they were kind of unhinging it. They were kind of taking over and just
I get that a lot.
It became kind of a gossip fest, or it became just like it became just like kind of dumb questions. It's like, okay, we actually as a community have already covered that. If you're wondering about that, why don't you have kind of a smaller conversation, not taking over this kind of whole community experience where we're all trying to enter into something together. You're kind of derailing what's supposed to be going on here, which is specifically to those people. Paul is saying, you guys need to chill out.
It doesn't make any less sexist though. 100%. Because as a man, I know we ask a ton of stupid questions as well at the most irrelevant times. It can't be just women.
It's not saying that women shouldn't. It says the women, specifically the women here at this time,
Women.
These women,
I'm going to read it.
the women.
Here it happens.
Okay, sorry.
Here, no, you're good. 14. What is this? We're going to start on the end of 33. As in all the congregations of the saints. Now, I take that as all the churches, right? I mean, is that how you take it? All the congregations.
God is not a God of communion. As in all the churches of the saints, the women should keep silent in churches, for they are not permitted to speak, but they should be in submission, as the law says.
As the law says. That's another great phrase I want to tackle, because I'm very confused on that one. But all the congregations. So you agree that's like all the churches. That's what he's saying. Not just this church here, not this one in Corinth. He's talking about all the churches. He's establishing what he wants to happen in the churches he's established already in these places. So well, let's not do that. Oh, women are talking. Oh, dude, don't let them talk. Oh, the law told you not to do that, man. What are you thinking? And the worst part is, if they want to inquire about something, they should ask their husbands at home, for it is disgraceful for a woman to speak in church. I think that's disgraceful to put in a book that everybody's telling me is a good book. That's horrible, man. And let's get back to the law. Well, first off, how do you take that? All congregations and women should be, silent and submissive, and it's disgraceful. I mean, that's a pretty strong language there.
Yeah, you're right. It is pretty strong language.
We agree. All right, show's over.
I mean, reading that, that's tough to swallow. I have these sort of tools that help me to like try to get past certain glitches like this, where it's like, well, maybe this is again God engaging with the sexism of that culture at that time, and it's like, sure. I mean, that's one way of trying to not sort of give up on what might be useful about this. And I think again, you might be able to infer a sort of conversation about, like, again, Paul is responding to a letter of what's going on here, and he's saying, so maybe these guys are saying, hey, the women want to know whether or not they can be, or like there's a lot of women talking during mass, or not mass, or during kind of our liturgy. What should we do about this? And obviously he's going specifically and saying that the women should keep silent in churches. I think in general, everybody who's not teaching is supposed to keep silent during the churches, during the liturgy. But they should be in submission, as the law. He specifically says the women, for they are not permitted. But then he goes even further and says, for it is shameful for a woman to speak in church. Yeah. And I don't, again, there's cultural context to that. Maybe there's genuine sexist religious context to that. Maybe it's like, maybe it's the case that it literally it culturally puts the women to shame to be like asking questions, or like if you're asking dumb questions in public, people kind of look down on you. I don't know. So I mean,
I don't know. Give me that shovel. Take that away. You're digging yourself.
like I said, I don't know, man. It's a tough one.
I love the I don't know, man. It is a tough one for sure. There's a lot of these things. I got a lot of them. This is just one of them. But I want to get back to the whole part where it says, as the law says. Now, I know I'm not very familiar with a law that tells women they have to be silent in the Old Testament. I don't know if there is one. Can you recall one? And it's capitalized law. Like, this is some law.
Yeah, like the Torah. Yeah, right.
So it's very confusing to me. That's one verse I've always struggled. Maybe we can figure that out later.
Or it says it doesn't say Torah. It says nomos or nomos.
Oh,
so I wonder what anything established, anything received by usage, custom of law, or is okay. So it's a custom, potentially a law or rule producing a state approved by God.
Mm-hmm. Approved by God. That's not good.
Okay, it could be of the Mosaic law, and context. Could be in the Christian religion. Okay, so it's potentially it could be to do with the Pentateuch, could be to do with the Torah.
Interesting. It's very interesting there. I'm very curious to find all that out for sure. But I mean, either way, that's a terrible verse. It's very hard to get past. And there's a couple of them in there about women. If you want to go back to laws, I kind of do, but these things are called perfect in several places. Holy, perfect, righteous. And I have a hard time with a lot of these laws, specifically the laws with women. I don't really want to get too much into it, but there's laws out there that say I think it's Deuteronomy 30 something. If the woman doesn't scream loud enough during rape, she's the one who's going to get killed as well. I mean, it's like, wow, dude, that's not a perfect law. I don't see any perfection in that ever. There's no gray point. It's just like, she's done. It's like, wow, what a harsh thing. And then you get to stone your kids, if they're disobedient or they curse you or they're back mouth. No, I don't want to stone kids. I mean, I don't care how bad a kid is, disobedient or cursing me or how much he hates me. I'm not going to stone a kid to death, man. But these are perfect laws that he has. Pick up the sticks on the Sabbath law, Numbers. If you pick up sticks or do any kind of work on the Sabbath, well, guess what happens? The whole town stones you to death. Capital punishment. Yahweh. Yeah. Yahweh way.
Well,
Yahweh way.
Again, so much of these are like there's so much to them. There's so much potentially to understand in order to understand the context of why would anybody say that? Why is that meaningful? And my experience has been whenever I'm confronted with these things and I take some, it sounds like your strategy here is you're looking for obviously you're looking for arguments to dismiss this thing.
Yeah,
just to falsify, right?
Everything I do, I look for something that's wrong. Why is this? Tell me the sun is orange. Well, I don't know if the sun is orange. Let me find out for myself. No, that looks, you got to investigate. You have to look into it, see what's wrong, see what's right. And I see a lot more wrong than I do right, especially when you go to start with the very beginning, from in the beginning, man. And that first chapter right off the bat, we've got days without the sun being created. How does that happen? You've got breathing things into existence. That's weird. We can go with poetry. That's fine, but creating people out of dust, and he doesn't know if the animals are going to be a good fit for the man, so he builds them anyways. That's not an all-knowing God. He curses them and it gets crazier and crazier as you go, and it just gets more difficult to follow and more difficult to believe as actual reality, especially if you're throwing this loving God that cares about people in there. The character of this God, is
you think that it's more confusing as you go? Because
absolutely.
As you go, as you get to, I see a sort of a progression from a really, really ancient cosmology, a really, really ancient view of reality and way of talking, to a more intelligible, almost historical way of talking about the stories of what was going on in the New Testament, and then talking about in Acts and stuff like that. And
are we reading the same book? Have you read Revelation? Do you know how this book ends?
Okay. So that's where we start zooming out again, right?
Yeah.
We start very esoteric, and then we approach something that actually almost makes sense. We get the first version of communism or of socialism in the New Testament within these Christian communities, right? And again, we begin to understand concepts like wisdom and humility, and it's like, I see it getting sort of easy. This is why some Christians say, just start with the New Testament and try to understand.
Brush that old thing under the rug. Don't even look over there.
I don't know what the best strategy is for engaging with the Bible. To me, I found some of them, it just helps to talk to people who really know it. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people within the Christian tradition, especially the Christian tradition of the West in the United States and in Canada, where our Protestantism has really disconnected us from any of the technology necessary to engage with these stories. Like we engage with them in a really, really surface level, and it's so confusing from that perspective. And it's like, I don't think that ultimately sort of God is the author of that confusion. I see that as that sort of pride of Protestantism cutting off our legs to be able to understand. It's like, because we were so convinced we get it, we've disconnected ourselves from, I've recently begun to pay attention to some more kind of Orthodox teachers, and as well as just various people who are just interested in investigating these things, like Tom Holland or Jordan Peterson, who are who are trying to engage with mythology in general, but with Christianity specifically, to say what are these stories getting at? And again, to say that you get it, that's the problem.
For sure. Yeah, no, it's definitely not easy to understand a lot of these.
but you're looking. I mean, you said you're just trying to kind of whenever somebody says something that seems kind of strange, you want to investigate it and see what's wrong and what's right.
Exactly.
But with these texts, I know for a fact that there's a rich dialogue even going on the internet of people saying more interesting things about these verses than just that they're crazy.
Well, it's not that some are crazy. Well, I'll admit that for sure. But a lot of these are very barbaric. Like these concepts they're horrible, and we can't justify them by just trying to find a meaning out of, don't pick up sticks or I'm going to stone you to death. We can definitely throw that out as there's not going to be much meaning in there. Let's try and go to, hey, let's love your neighbor. Okay, I can find meaning in that. Well, where else can I find that? I can find that in all the other religions.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting to just throw those out and go to the stuff that's easy. Like I mean, maybe from a sort of a personal perspective, sometimes that's what you need to do. But there's a process of gradually building an understanding, especially of a massive tome like the Bible. There's so many different types of literature there, so many different authors, so many different contexts they're writing from. Centuries. It's impossible to get to the end of it, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's centuries, thousands, at least a good 1,000 years separating the oldest and well, I mean, I don't probably even older for the oldest stuff, depending on if you go back through the oral tradition or whatever. But it's old stuff, and it takes a really, really broad education to understand it. And people are obviously still arguing, who have been studying this stuff all their life. They're still arguing about what these stories are about, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But when I encounter these strange laws, and I search around a little bit longer than just the answer that tells me, oh yeah, that is strange. It's like I can come to that conclusion all by myself. But when I engage with, maybe somebody who studies this sort of thing, they tell me something a little bit more about it. And I listen to somebody else who's studying it from a different, maybe scientific, maybe mythological, maybe religious perspective. They tell me something else about it. And it's like, it's almost always those key, strangest parts of the story that end up leading to the most interesting, meaningful experiences of discovering the actual meanings of the story. Like, almost any one of these old myths sound. Here's the craziest thing is that as you engage with these myths, your palate, your translative ability of being able to dig through the strangeness of the story to try to find some meaning in it, it gets better. Like when I read all the various mythology that I've tried to read over the past several years, it's like it doesn't just land like a totally crazy story. It's starting to come alive to me the longer I take the time to engage with it. Like the story is about Horus and Osiris and Set. That story is like something that helps me to live better. It's not just a crazy story. It's something that I actually think about. And like when I'm confronted with a problem, that story reminds me of something true about life. And when I'm in an argument with my wife, when I think about Buddhist philosophy and engaging with nothingness, it doesn't just sound like stupid whateverness. It's like the craziest parts of, when I first tried to read any of the Dalai Lama, it's like, it sounds so nihilistic, where he just talks about everything is impermanent, everything is nothing. It's like, that doesn't sound redemptive at all. It sounds totally horrible, and I don't want to read it. But the longer I've sat with and engaged with that stuff, the more it's changed me.
For the better.
Yeah, I think for the better. It's to the extent that I understand better.
Well, and again, I would just argue that we can find better sources for bettering ourselves that don't have the rape, the slavery, the bloodshed for forgiveness, and that's just war.
That seems like the most obviously wrong thing that you said.
That's good.
There's no tradition of mythology, no tradition of philosophy, of religious understanding of cosmology that isn't difficult to understand and it doesn't have crazy shit in it. There's literally none.
I think we can find better sources.
The more you sanitize that stuff out of it, the more ideological your perspective about the world becomes, the less mystery there is, right? Mystery is a fundamentally important part of engaging with reality.
How so?
Well, mystery is that element of, it's like, okay, it's the category of the limit of your understanding, right? It's like, if you engage mystery, if mystery is part of your worldview, that like the way that you understand the world, then you're always refraining from eating that, or you're at least you're somewhat refraining from eating that tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? If you don't have that category of mystery, you become you become a nationalist, you become a communist, you become like an extremist communist, you become a radical feminist, you become a radical Southern Baptist Christian who thinks they understand exactly what heaven and hell are about. You become a radical person who is more easily identified by hatred than anything else. Without that category of mystery about the way that you view the world, you become a horrible, horrible person. And it's like that. If we want to tell stories that help us to understand reality, if we don't include sort of holy, and what I mean by holy is like a separatedness, a set apartness, something that you can't grasp. If there aren't gods in our stories, then our stories make us into evil people.
So does Yahweh have mystery? If he knows everything, does he have any mystery? And if he doesn't have mystery, does that make him a horrible person?
Yahweh, well, I mean, Yahweh as in the character in these stories, or sort of the greater
God in general, your God.
Yeah.
I mean, I call him Yahweh because that's what he names himself in the Bible. But I mean, whatever you want to call him. I mean, does your deity have any mystery? Or, and then if he doesn't have any mystery, why is he not a horrible person?
Well, if to kind of strip away too much dead weight to thinking about God, if you want to stop thinking about him as a person, because it's almost difficult to, I mean, I think eventually that becomes a meaningful way of talking about and engaging with God. But just to kind of step away from that and just have a category of God. So we have a category of mystery, and we want to have something else that's identified with this character that we don't understand it. And this is, we're hypothetically talking about the best way of doing everything, the best perspective to look at everything from. If we want to characterize that abstract category of just the bestness and put a name on it, right? That can be our God. That can be our, that becomes, it's the point of having, again, it's like, this is a big part of my relationship with God, is that God fundamentally is the mystery. But he's also, it's like, there's this language within a lot of different mythology, but specifically the Christian canon of God being the first and the last, right? Where it's like, he's the complete understanding of everything, and he's the complete bottom of everything that's like beyond understanding as well. And so, I mean, yeah, God is fundamentally different from humans because he literally sees every possible perspective and is engaging every possible perspective at every possible moment in every possible situation at all times. So literally the idea of God is the limitlessness of reality, or like the limitless perspective. So no, God doesn't have a limit, because that's fundamentally not what God is.
So he has no limit. So he has no mystery. He knows everything.
Right.
But he's still a good being.
Right. Well, and because the only reason that we need to have that understanding of like mystery is because we don't know everything. But if hypothetically you did know everything, then why would you also think that you don't know everything?
Well, I don't think it'd make you an evil person if you knew everything, though. I mean,
no, that's the point, is that if you actually knew everything, then you wouldn't be evil. It wouldn't be evil to know everything or to say that you knew everything. So if we say that God knows everything and he actually knows everything, then obviously he's not evil if he says, I know everything.
Okay. All right. So we're running out of time, but there's so much still left to talk about. Is God in control right now?
What do you mean by that?
Is this the best he can do? Is this world his workmanship? Is this it? He's let it loose. He's in control here. This is what he wants to do. This is how he wants things to be run. Is this it? Is this God's best work?
I think within the Christian perspective, there's an idea of like God being extremely sad at the state of things.
This is right, the way he made it, though.
Well, sure. And when I don't want to brush any of this off, because this is the realist. I know these are real doubts, and these are real hard questions, but
thank you for taking the time to answer them.
I was talking to my wife the other day just about this seems to be a discussion that's kind of coming up a lot, of just like there's a lot of antinatalist philosophy popping up. Specifically, I don't know, it's like my wife sees the brokenness of existence so much more clearly than I do, and it's like it breaks her heart, and she's like, why would you bring anybody into existence? Why would you do that? This life is horrible. And like it's hard for me to, like, I don't look at the world that way. My perspective is like, I have difficulty engaging with the perspective of seeing the horribleness of life, because I just like I don't know, I'm an optimist, I guess.
That's good.
But like,
I mean, to a point, of course, but
but yeah. So I don't know why it is that I am excited about the idea of being alive.
That's good.
I mean, so asking why it is that God would want people to be alive in a world that allows for people to do horrible things to each other, and even for beyond human will, the will of other forces in creation to hurt each other and hurt humans. It's obviously there's something worth crying about there. There's something worth being upset about, something worth saying, is this worth it? And, you know, the intuition is just that, yeah, maybe it somehow is worth it. Yeah. I don't know exactly how or why or what it's all leading to, but it's just optimism is sort of it's a perspective beyond reason.
Sometimes, yeah, I can agree with that. But you make the best out of it. You make your own purpose. That's what I've come to realize is, you know, I mean, yes, there is horrible things in the world. Yes, there's a lot of hard and difficult things to deal with. But at the same time, you know, you have your family, you have your loved ones, you have yourself, you have breath in your lungs. You know, you've got a good book right next to you whenever you want it. There's things to live for, and every day. I mean, there's a lot of hard things to deal with, for sure. You watch the news, just listening to the news and the horrible things that we do to each other. And you think about a loving being sitting up there watching all of this happening. You know, is that really a loving father figure? You know, is that really someone that wants the best for us, to just let this happen, let all these people die and suffer and
yeah. And I mean, that's fundamentally the same question my wife is asking me. It's like, why would you want to bring a child into the world? Like, I become just as evil as the figure of God that I'm thinking about in that kind of scenario if I decide to have a kid, right?
Well, I mean, it's tough for sure. I mean, but you make the best out of it. You make what you can. And you know, I've got kids and they're making the best out of their life. And I just, you know, you can only hope and you can only help out so much. So,
but where your question is going is like, if you can make the rules about the world that your kids are going to live in, if it's actually all up to you,
wow,
then you'd be a pretty horrible father to create this world.
Yeah,
is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes, 100%. I would not create this world for my kids.
Right.
Even the Garden of Eden, if I was the father figure in that story, I wouldn't place those trees there in temptation. I would teach, I would learn. There's so many other ways to go about things as opposed to just, you ate it, I'm going to curse you forever and your descendants forever. You're all going to be, you know, I mean, whoa, slow down, man. Grounded for life. I mean, holy cow.
So in your ideal world, what are some key differences?
Oh, well, for starters, the whole forgiveness from bloodshed. Let's stop that right there. I wouldn't curse women with painful childbirth. That's dumb. Why would you do that? And then what was it? Was Eve having kids before where it wasn't painful? How did she have them? Did they just pop up? I don't know. She sneezed them out. I don't know. Something not painful, apparently. So Yahweh had a different plan.
I mean, beyond the critique of the Christian cosmology, what are some key traits of like the universe that you would?
Oh, well, I would start with no cancer in kids. There'd be a big start right there. kids would be immune to cancer. What a good idea. Not for Yahweh though. Brain cancer, anything that suffers, and leukemia and horrible things. They've got viruses and even insects that'll just bore themselves into children. I mean, why can't we just make children immune to stuff? Why can't we just like the horrible stuff? Obviously, they're going to scrape their knee.
When do they stop being immune?
I don't know. Maybe we can do like an 18 thing. I don't know. See, again, I'm not a perfect, this perfect all-knowing being. I'm just Mike. I got these ideas. Hey,
is that some humility I sense? I sense there, Mike?
Definitely a lot of humility.
Well, I appreciate that.
You know what I mean? I wouldn't be putting out a book that talks about slavery and how we should keep our slaves and beat our slaves. I wouldn't put out a book that says, I need bloodshed for forgiveness. I need my only son to die because I can't forgive you for what Adam did for me putting the thing in front of him and allow it. It's just, there's a lot to it that I wouldn't do. And Yahweh chose opposite, man. And I don't see that as a loving father figure. I don't see that as a competent, humble being. No, he's all about himself. He's very full of himself. And if you're not, he's gonna kill your kids or make you eat them. Just these are the things I see. We are out of time. I go ahead and answer to that one, and then we'll plug your stuff.
Oh, I didn't hear a question mark at the end of that.
Oh, just whatever, if you have to say after all my ramblings there.
Well, I don't know. I mean, yeah, there's nothing I can do to sweep all these questions under the rug. I mean, I could just sweep them under the rug, but that would be totally disingenuous. That would be the opposite of what I think Christianity is about. And I think one of the fundamental things that we've struggled with in the Christian tradition, specifically in the West for the most recent leg of Christianity, is that we've tried to do that. We've tried to just take all of those really great, really difficult questions and just kind of wipe them away. Yeah. Right. And until, I mean, I'm preaching to my community here, until we're willing to actually sit on those things. And I love that your favorite answer, it seems like, on this show is I don't know.
I love it.
Because I think that's one of the most meaningful critiques you could give my community is we need to learn how to say I don't know more.
Absolutely.
And it's my prayer that we do.
Oh man, there's still so much left to talk about, man. We'll do this again sometime. For sure. Plug your show, your music. Great singing, by the way. Love it. Go ahead and plug your stuff. Thanks. Where can we find you? What do you do? All that.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you can, my name's Garrett Vandenberg. If you Google me, you'll find a bunch of random stuff I've done. But yeah, I've got obviously this show, and I have my own kind of YouTube project I've been doing this year, talking to different people, just trying to get better at communicating and at listening, and hopefully encouraging other people to do, especially other Christians in my community, but in general, just trying to get better at communicating and listening. And yeah, I also like to write music. I have a kind of a meditational project called Unknow that's hopefully going to be coming out sometime this year. I put out a album of covers called Run for Cover.
Clever.
Yeah, so you got that right away. Yeah. Not everybody does for some reason. Actually, on the cover, I'm holding some vinyl records.
Oh, of course.
Cover songs.
There you go.
And I'm in the rain. Okay, it really is quite clever, I think.
One on top of the other, just throwing them out there.
But yeah, so I mean, I do several things. If you want to come engage and you want to ask me questions, you want to tell me why all my opinions are stupid and dumb, I'd appreciate that.
Never. Man.
I've got a YouTube channel and I've got Facebook and stuff. So come and chat with me. But seriously, man, thank you so much for chatting. And I'm sorry I got a little bit spirited today.
No, I love it. It's good. We did good today. We did awesome. And we still haven't even talked about the revelation or heaven or hell.
I know. I thought you told me before you wanted to talk about hell. I spent this whole morning looking at all this stuff about hell.
Well, so, keep those notes.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll do it next time for sure. We'll definitely entitle it Hell. We're talking about hell for
hell.
Sure
what the hell?
What the hell are we talking about? We'll throw it full of puns, man. All right. Good talking to you. I'll keep in touch. I'll let you know when this comes out. And That's all the show there is for you today. Thanks for listening. If you like what you heard and want to help keep the recording light on, simply go to patreon.com/bswthepodcast and sign up to be a supporter of the show. Your episodic tithes of $1 or more will give you access to the patron feed, unaired conversations, early access to each episode, and much more. For the latest events, BSW swag, and a peek behind the scenes, head over to the show's ever-evolving webpage at thebiblesayswhat.com. The Bible Says What the book is out. Head on over to thebiblesayswhat.com and get yourself and your grandma a signed copy. Supplies are limited. Thanks to the cosmic powers of the internet, it is now possible to buy me a beer or coffee online. Simply go to buymeacoffee.com/BSW the podcast and click the appropriate buttons. If you can't support the show monetarily, please like, share, and or leave a review. As always, you can find me at the Bible Says What Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram pages. You can also reach me at bswthepodcast@gmail.com. And no matter which platform you use to listen to your podcast, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss out on the next episode. Until then, would you kindly pick up your Bibles and read them?
On my side and send that to you if you want this time too.
I love it. Thank you.
That'll be even, because then you get even higher quality. We'll go from like the worst quality ever,
Testing one, two,
maybe
three.
one of the best.
I hope so, man. Let's do it. I'm excited. All right. So I did listen to Pits and
Testing
Pieces.
1, 2, 3.
Bits
who's
and
that?
pieces.
Who's that guy? Do you hear that? Testing 1, 2, 3 keeps popping up.
What?
Are you hearing that? No, it's just me on my end.
Yeah, I think
That was weird. All right, I kept hearing somebody say testing 1, 2, 3. Like
that's creepy.
it was a little weird. It was a little weird. I thought maybe it was
Sheesh.
something on your end.
Maybe with all your atheism over there, you got some demons in your system.
All those invisible bad guys.